How are things going at your school?
Yeah, so I'm at Lanchester EP Primary School, which is in County Durham in the northeast of England. We're a relatively large school, including EYFS. I think around about 430 pupils. So I think sort of giving a little bit of backstory to it. Nobody could have planned for this situation. It was impossible of anybody to have planned for what was happening. But we did feel quite prepared, is probably the best way of saying, when it did happen, in that we're a school that's for probably 6 or 7 years now had a lot of technology embedded in place, certainly from a primary point of view. Sort of technology is something we're very big on. So when we heard that schools were closed, and obviously, like a lot of schools, it was emergency staff meetings and how are we going to tackle this? And actually, the thing that we very quickly decided was we didn't want to introduce anything new. You know, there's lots of wonderful offers from amazing companies who are making their products free, and that will be invaluable to a lot of schools. I'm not knocking that for one second. But what we actually decided for us as a school, for the staff, for the pupils, for the parents, that we already had enough things in place that we could deliver distance learning, online learning, home learning, whatever you want to call it. And yes, there was a few tweaks to how we were using those resources, but actually there were already things in place. So there was a heck of a lot of work before Easter, but actually what was quite nice on Sunday night, I sort of went to bed and it was as we were for us on Monday, which was probably very different from lots of schools going back this Monday, where there's obviously been lots of new high profile generic resources and everything else released on Monday. But for us, there's been an element of business as usual, which is, I suppose, the best testament I can give to my staff and my school for what we've put in place over the last 6 to 7 years. And I'm sure we'll discuss some of those things as we progress over the next hour or so.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Martin. I did share with you some of the potential questions that we can ask you. One of them was back to assessments being meaningful, or can assessments provide a meaningful summary of student progress? Can you share with us some of the tools that you're using that are enabling you to keep a track of what your learners are doing? I know one of them, for example, is learning by questions.
It is, yeah. I was having a bit think when you sent the questions through, and I think we've got 4 tools at the moment that we've got in place that are enabling us to assess our pupils. Now, again, that's not to say that we are using them at the moment with the purpose of assessment in mind, but they certainly allow us to do that. So I suppose if I go through chronologically, if you like, from early years through the school, in early years, we've got something called Evidence Me. Used to be to build a profile by 2 Simple software. And I think actually, there will be people, I'm sure, already listening who are, possibly a bit horrified that we're talking about assessment, particularly from early years primary point of view. But actually, the early years framework, really does talk about it being vital, like what is happening in the home. And actually, that is something really valuable for teachers to get that sort of snapshot of home life, and using, whether it be, Evidence Me, whether it be Tapestry, any of these other things that are available. Actually, our EYFS staff are still able to make sort of assessments based on home learning. And actually, when we strip it right the way back, and if we're talking about like that being essential, that being valuable at early years, then we shouldn't be horrified to be talking about it at Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2 either. This getting a snapshot into home life can potentially be a little bit of a bonus, something that we don't sort of always get. And just because work is being done at home, in a different sort of scenario to normal, doesn't mean that it's not valuable. So Evidence Me is proven to be, invaluable in terms of our EYFS staff communicating with pupils and parents on a day-to-day basis. Then in terms of Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, years 1 to year 6, we use eSchools as like a VLE, a learning platform. And so our staff are pushing out daily work on there. So there's English lessons, maths lessons, and topic lessons are getting pushed out sort of via eSchools. So, our pupils are accessing work via eSchools each day. And again, whilst we're not looking at that as an assessment tool at the minute, that is something that's built in place there. So moving down the line, if we did want to set out work that was sort of submitted for assessment purposes, it wouldn't enable us to do that. You mentioned learning by questions. That's been brilliant. I've just done some live lessons using that this morning. We had 112 of our Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 pupils, logged on sort of live this morning, doing lessons with learning by questions, where as staff, we were actually able to be there live, following along the lesson, seeing what they could, what they couldn't do, offer, scaffolding and support and stuff to it. And yes, again, it wasn't with the purpose of assessment sort of today, but if we see a fast forward 6 months, I don't think I'm being too radical in saying that we might be in a situation in 6 months' time where there's at least partial closures of schools sort of still in place. And actually, if we jump to that point, then whether we want to call it assessment, whether we want to call it getting a snapshot into their life, whatever it may be, that is going to become essential to sort of bridge that gap to best prepare sort of that period of transition that is going to take place, whether that be in June, in September, in October, in January 2021, whenever that may be. Having a snapshot, an assessment, whatever we want to call it, of where kids are at is going to be invaluable. So doing something like learning by questions, we're doing it twice a week at the moment. That may increase sort in the coming weeks and months, will be sort of invaluable there. And then the fourth tool that we've got Purple Mash by Two Simple Software, and within there, you can set to do sort, and there teachers can sort of differentiate the work. You can set it against national curriculum objectives. So again, it's not what we're doing at the moment, but at least we've got the confidence that we've got about sort of 4 tools in our sort of arsenal, if you like, that will allow us to assess pupils moving forward, if that's something that we need to do. And even if we're not thinking about assessment formally, it is at least still on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, giving us an idea of where our children are at, but actually in that home environment, what they can, what they can't do, and so on.
Okay.
Very interesting. Are there any sort of limitations, do you think, to some of the tools that you're using?
We certainly had to think very carefully before we went down this route sort of for home learning. So some of the key things that we put in place was that we said that anything that we were using, we wanted to be like sort of device agnostic. We didn't want sort of, the need for people to have a certain device. And certainly for lots of households now, probably a mobile phone is their main device of internet access.
Yeah.
We didn't really consider, in inverted commas, internet access too much. I think we've generally progressed a little bit beyond that as a nation, where most people have at least got 4G, if not sort of Wi-Fi sort of in the homes. So we said, right, as long as people can access something on a mobile phone, that is our sort of number one priority. So with these schools, you can go onto it on any device. We're not wanting anything that has to be printed out. There's nothing set in a specific Word, PowerPoint document, whatever. Everything's put on as a PDF, and the children are still actually doing their work in a physical home learning book. So we sent a physical exercise book home, but the day-to-day work is set via e-schools, which they access. So even if it's just on, mum or dad's phone, they can sort of call up the daily work and stuff like that on there. So that was something we had to consider, and we think that the vast majority of our pupils will be able to access things that way. We took the approach, rather than going like, oh, we're not going to go down that route because one or two may not. We'll work with those families individually. We're obviously speaking to our families on the phone, and we'll put alternative provision in place or support those families that need be. But to me, I think we could look and go, actually, the vast majority of our pupils are going to be able to access in this way. So why would you not go down the route of online learning, of using technology, when actually, most can sort of do that? But you do have to think carefully. And I've heard, a few horror stories, should I say, of people sharing things in a particular format, or you need a particular device sort of to access sort of things. I think the first thing a lot of people think of, though, is almost like the adult support or the help that they may or they may not be getting. Is it the pupil's own work? Again, I don't worry too much about that, because I think, whether you call it assessment, whether you call it snapshot, I'm not really thinking too much about those ones that, if you did a test or whatever you want to call it, where the score might be like suddenly very elevated from what you'd expect. As teachers, you'll spot that a mile off. That's not anything you need to worry about. But actually, we've all got lots of children in our classes each day that need that support, that need those intervention strategies that are not happening now in school. And actually, I think it's for those type of children that, you know, the assessment, the snapshot, whatever you want to call it, is going to be vital as the weeks and the months sort of move forward, and actually getting an idea of, you know, what support they might need, you know, because as teachers, we're going to do it. You know, I say it all parents, don't worry too much. Our job, you know, we will close those gaps. We've done it for years for, you know, 1,000,001 other reasons, and we will do it again as an education force. But having that picture will best prepare us for whenever schools and whenever people's sort of do go back. So those are the ones that I'm sort of most interested in, particularly as the weeks and the months go on. Those children that rely on a lot of additional support, who maybe don't get the support in the home, or maybe for very valid reasons in the coming weeks and months, they're in a household where parents are trying to work full time amongst everything else, so can't be sitting down and supporting the children sort of day to day. So there'll be a whole range of different reasons as to why children may, you know, have greater gaps sort of in their learning come the time when they go back to school. And the better the picture we can have of that, the better things are going to be for when they do return to school.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting getting a comment in on the chat here, just from Rosie Davis, saying about mistakes being made with, I'm guessing she means like accessibility to documents and resources being shared. It's interesting because that's what came in there as a parallel to what you were saying about making sure that whatever you were enabling your learners to get access to was going to work on platforms, and so it was agnostic. So it didn't really matter what devices they had so much, because the way you're approaching it is one which can be sort of easily accessible.
Yeah, using something like learning by questions that were mentioned this morning. There's a free Apple app, there's a free Android app, but it also works on any web browser. So, you know, you've got, you know, fairly, you know, degree of confidence that sort of most households are going to be able to access that.
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Did you have any questions at all, Bukky?
Yeah, no, thanks. I had one, and thanks for that explanation. I love the fact you've got 4 different, I suppose, platforms or tools in which assessments can be undertaken. And I know you mentioned about the fact that you weren't too concerned about the internet access to the children, and that most of them, you know, would be able to use, say, like a mobile. What happens in a circumstance when the child doesn't actually have any way of accessing any of the learning? You know, for example, they may be our most vulnerable students, for example. What ways have been put in place to assess where they are in terms of their learning?
Yeah, you know, I've got to stress, obviously, tonight we're thinking a lot about, you know, distance learning. We're naturally talking about the technology. You know, we did make sure that when children sort of first sort of went home, that there was a physical pack of work that went home with each children. That has been updated. We've even had staff, you know, going around sort of physically delivering work sort of through the doors of pupils and so on. Well, obviously, for certain children, we're speaking to them on the phone every day. For all families, we're speaking to on a weekly basis and stuff like that, you know, digitally and physically. So we're making sure that work is getting to pupils, whatever way it might be. We're supporting families in a lot of different ways. So yes, I'm talking tonight about what we're doing for the majority, and that we did decide that would be the majority of our pupils. But in the same way as you differentiate for different pupils in school, you're doing exactly the same for home learning. You know, you're putting different support packages in place for different people. But an awfully big percentage of our students are accessing online resources on a daily and a weekly basis.
Okay.
Can you see that within the platforms you're using? Is the actual opportunity for you to sort of see how many students are engaging, so pupils are engaging with the various tools that you're using?
We do sort of diagnostics each week. So I'm not giving too much away, but sort of on eSchools, for example, we can see, you know, how often sort of pupils have access, what sort of times of day they're accessing. So certainly at the end of that first week of home learning, sort of the penultimate week before the Easter holidays, one of the jobs I did do was go online on the Friday and provided the head teacher with a list of any pupils who hadn't been on at all. And I suppose that follows from Bukky's previous question a little bit there. So then when the head teacher made the phone calls home the following week, it wasn't in a like, why haven't you been online? It was actually, again, just building up a little picture of home life. Well, is it due to the technology? Is it due to internet? Has there been something happened in the family home? You know, so again, it's all about making sure you've got that clear picture. And we've talked a lot about, you know, staying connected at the minute. I heard a lovely quote, and we've used it with our pupils, that, you know, at a time when all the pieces aren't together in the box like a jigsaw, how can we still complete the puzzle? And that's the sort of way that we're sort of thinking at the minute, of like keeping connected in whatever way we can. So, you know, all those conversations, whoever we're doing it now, you know, via Twitter, via email, via the learning platforms, via the telephone call, everything that helps to, you know, complete that picture is absolutely essential in staying connected as a school community.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Just got a few comments coming through. You got Shell, sort of just Edu Creative in the America district sending work and hotspots, and I'm guessing those are like wireless dongles from hotspots there, Chromebooks, printed packets and things, and meals by the school bus. And I guess it's sort of doing the run around that they would do in the morning, but with resources and everything they need on the school buses. That's really interesting to hear. Thank you so much for that. We've got another comment from this person, Shelton T101, for A-level, that they've encouraged their pupils to write up their answers in timed conditions and then photograph. I guess with that sort of approach of doing things, you know, and I know it's myself with my own children, you know, they want help, don't they? Is there anything, you know, and you mentioned before about when some students who you might think do at a certain level here, but then doing a bit better or a bit worse, it sort of flags up, doesn't it? Your teacher radar spots a bit of a skewed result.
And our parents really appreciate that. It's you know, I've seen a lovely comment on Twitter on Tuesday when we're doing the lesson, like one of my parents, you know, tweeted like, thank you, you know, I actually managed to finish a cup of coffee sort of for the first time in weeks, and had half an hour listening to Women's Hour on the radio and stuff like that, you know? Yeah, and it's like, and I thought, we often forget about that a little bit, you know, quite rightly, we're putting our students first, as we always do, but actually our parents are struggling a little bit at the minute. It is really hard for them to juggle. So anything you can do to still offer support. So yes, things like learning by questions is great, but through eSchools, we've got like a class discussion sort of page where, like, in a general sense, sort of, that can be that communication, talking about tasks, but also through eSchools, our pupils can message the teacher and ask for sort of help. That's a completely recorded platform, so it's very, very safe and secure. So there is actually still communication happening on a day-to-day basis between our pupils and our staff, and as much as we humanly can as teachers, we're still being there for our pupils, but also being there for our parents and our carers too.
That's brilliant, Martin. Thank you so much, and it really sort of resonates the sort of things that I see out there as well. And I've been, you know, I know yourself, and I've met your head, and over the years and things a few times, both up at your events that you run, and also at places like Beth, and you've brought the students down to Beth and spoken on the net support stand and all those sorts of things. It really does seem that, the hard yards you've gone through in developing the use of technology in the school is really starting to pay its dividends now. Do you have any sort of key gems? If schools are thinking, you know, we do need to try and bring in some tools to use, and aren't in a position to do so now, and have followed advice and said now isn't the time to bring new stuff in, but they're thinking about, actually we should try and do something to support some of the things we're talking about today. Do you have any sort of advice for schools who are looking to try and bring something in, not about products really, but about how you actually go about implementing that and getting it working? Are there any things that from your experience under normal circumstances and now working with these things under lockdown, are there any sort of ideas you might have around how you can be successful if you're a school thinking about doing that sort of thing now?
Yeah, I think sort of the best thing I can say is, you know, you mentioned my head teacher there in conversation, is that it does need that top-down approach. You need, certainly, I'm, you know, thinking from a primary, and I would guess it would be the same in secondary and FE as well. But, you know, social media has been massive to us, you know, products like Learning by Question, these schools I mentioned, but they have had the backing, not in a stick way, but in a carrot way, from the head teacher from day one, and she's really endorsed and empowered sort of what we've done. So staff have been on board, and yeah, it takes time. You can't be sort of like, you know, I want this now, I want this now. You know, I've been at the school, this is, you know, come towards the end of my 7th year now, and I'm not saying that everything we've done has been in that 7 years, but even if you take it as a 7-year journey, that's what it's been from sort of when we started to first embed technology. Some schools have tried to do what we did in 7 years over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And, you know, that is why, even for a school like myself, we didn't want to even introduce, you know, 1 or 2 new products when all these companies were contacting us 4 or 5 weeks ago going, this is free, we made it free. And again, I'm not knocking that. It's great to have, but there was enough of that stuff going on in our school for us to be taking on getting our head around a new product or platform as well. Now, what I would say is now might be the time to introduce one new thing, like of those things I've mentioned or anything else that's out there, then yeah, maybe do take the time to learn it. You can, learn these things online. I've been working with a couple of schools in the last few weeks, helping them with things like with these schools, we're learning by questions and so on. And I know quite a few schools have sort of, maybe as of this week have gone down that route. So just mentioning some of the things, said that learning by questions, if you want to try it out, they've just brought out something called LBQ at Home, which is completely free. It's a bit like a light version of it, but it will give you a feel as a school as to what's involved in learning by questions. So you could try that out in the coming weeks. If you're getting a good response, then maybe think about the full version that would allow the assessment point of view. These schools that I've mentioned, again, they've got their teaching and learning tools are completely free at the moment. If you want to have a look into that, great to do so. Happy to help schools that might want a bit of support sort of around there. I know my colleague Simon McLaughlin has written an excellent blog post. I'll share the link about how we've used Evidence Me for early years for assessment there. And I'm sure, and as well, Purple Mash, which I've mentioned, is completely free at the minute. So actually, everything that we've been using, if you do want to have a little look at it or use, you can do probably, largely free of charge at the moment.
Okay,
brilliant
thank you.
stuff.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry, can I just add? Sorry, can I just add? I love the fact, Martin, you started from the fact that in order for the assessments you use to actually go ahead, the head teacher made a decision. And I think it's really important to reinforce about the fact no matter which particular piece of technology you use, SLT really need to understand about the benefits of it. And more importantly, how it's actually going to be helping the school community, the students, how it will aid their learning and how it will aid the teachers as well, and actually putting in relevant support as well. But unless you've got that strategic overview, what you find is it's a bit of a hit and miss approach. So yeah, so it's great to hear you reinforcing the fact that the head teacher was really clear about what she wanted in terms of assessments, and that was the driving force for it.
Totally agree. Yeah, you need all members of the school community involved, but without the head teacher backing it, if it had just been me going and delivering staff meetings without sort of, the head agreeing or the head being actively involved in what we're trying to achieve, then we wouldn't have been in the position that we were sort of 5 weeks ago in terms of, like I say, being prepared. We wouldn't want to be in this position, but that's what I've been telling people, that when it did happen, we felt prepared.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's really fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us, Martin.